Hello and welcome to Edison TV. My name is Aaron Atkar, Healthcare Research Analyst at Edison. Today we are joined by Antti Vuolanto, CEO of Herantis Pharma, and Henri Huttunen, the company's Chief Scientific Officer. Today we're going to discuss the latest developments for clinical candidates HER96, which is a potential disease modifier for Parkinson's disease. Antti, Henri, thanks for joining today. So, first of all, to set the scene, can you summarize the unmet need in Parkinson's disease and how Herantis' lead clinical candidate has been designed to address this?
Yeah, so Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder that affects only over 10 million people globally. The current treatments treat symptoms by relieving or by replacing or mimicking dopamine, but they do not address the underlying neurodegenerative processes that drive the disease. And as the result, the patients continue to experience worsening of the motor and non-motor functions over time. So there is a major unmet clinical need, and therefore there has been over the years many attempts to develop disease-modifying therapies to restore the dopaminergic neurons and their activity. Our lead candidate, HER96, has been really designed to address this unmet clinical need, and it is based on the activity of a neurotrophic factor called CDNF that we have also studied earlier, and CDNF addresses the proteostasis imbalance and also addresses neuroinflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. However, the major challenge with CDNF was that it was an intracranial product. And now with HER96, we capture the full activity of the CDNF, but we can use subcutaneous administration. And now we have just recently released phase 1 data, which really shows that we do have a biological response to the treatment. So we believe that HER96 can really modify the disease, slow or even stop the progression of Parkinson's disease. So we believe that we are currently, in a way, in the forefront of the development of this new era of Parkinson's treatments.
Fantastic. So moving on then to how the lead candidate has fended in the clinic. We'll come on to some of the biomarker data, but could you recap maybe first of all the phase 1b readout from October last year?
Yes, during the second half last year, we completed a phase 1b study. This was a continuation to a previous phase 1a study that was a single ascending dose study in healthy volunteers. So in the phase 1b study, we recruited 24 people with Parkinson's who received subcutaneous doses of HER96 twice weekly for 4 weeks. The primary endpoint of this study was safety and tolerability, and secondary endpoint was related to how HER96 is distributed and metabolized in the body, so-called pharmacokinetics. And then we had a large number of exploratory biomarker-related outcomes. The primary endpoint was met. The drug was clearly safe and well tolerated. There were very few systemic adverse events, and most adverse events were related to the injection site, which is, of course, expected for an injectable product. And these adverse events were mostly mild and transient. So we're very happy with that primary endpoint outcome. And regarding the secondary outcome measure related to pharmacokinetics, we again were able to demonstrate blood-brain barrier penetration in patients. Previously, we also had that from healthy volunteers, so now we can see very clearly the cerebrospinal fluid presence of HER96, and those levels are according to our expectations, and these dose levels seem to be right to be taken towards phase 2.
Fantastic. So coming on now to the biomarker program, which was also a key component of the clinical development to date. These outcomes were presented in January earlier this year, right? So could you outline maybe some of the key takeaways from this update and maybe touch upon how those results support the mechanism of action as a potential disease modifier?
Absolutely. The goal of the biomarker part of the phase 1b study was to demonstrate biological response to HER96 for the first time in the human body. And one challenge, a big challenge there was that there are no established biomarkers related to the target pathway, which is the so-called unfolded protein response pathway. So because there are no established biomarkers, we actually had to do a lot of legwork and exploratory work here, which was generously supported by the Parkinson's UK and Michael J. Fox Foundation, which allowed us to go really broad in the biomarker exploration. With more than 2.5 million data points collected from these 24 subjects, we were able to finally conclude that there is clearly a biological response to the treatment, both peripherally, meaning in the sort of like the body overall, and then in the cerebrospinal fluid as well, which is of course then part of central nervous system. And these responses are clearly linked to the mechanism of action relating to markers related to proteostasis, protein homeostasis, and shortly, and also mitochondrial function, which appears to be a critical component of this functional recovery effect that the HER96 has. So we're very happy with that outcome. It really provides an important de-risking piece of data on our journey from phase 1 towards phase 2.
Excellent. So then moving on, what can you tell us about the design of the upcoming phase 2 trial?
Yeah, so we're currently working on the design, which would be a sort of like logical next step, and obviously the next step relates to the first assessment of efficacy in human patients. So in this study, we would be looking at early signals of efficacy in early stage Parkinson's patients. So exact design is still being worked out, so we can't disclose too many details, but we can already kind of foresee that the study will be roughly around 100 patients, fairly early stage Parkinson's. The dosing would be again twice weekly. We would be dosing for somewhere from 6 to 12 months, possibly. And the study would be run entirely in Europe, in selected European clinical centers.
Excellent. We're looking forward to seeing the next update. Moving on now to the finances side of things. Herantis recently announced a directed share issue alongside a grant from Horizon Europe. So could you share some of the details on those, please, and what they mean for the company?
Yeah, so first of all, the 4.2 million private placement that we conducted in early February, that of course extends our cash runway, allows us to continue with the phase 2 preparations, and of course allows us to really put together the resources required for the phase 2. And there, as we have disclosed also earlier, we are looking at partnerships with pharma. We are looking at discussions with investors and also grant financing. And there, of course, on that front, we have been very successful, as we just announced 8 million euro grant for the phase 2 conduct. And that's really kicking in once we start the patient treatments in phase 2. And in that consortium, together with Herantis, we have several university hospitals, leading sites in Europe, and also an imaging site. So that's a very good support for Herantis, and of course very competitive financing, and winning this type of a grant after rigorous evaluation is a quality stamp on what we are currently doing with Herantis and what are our goals.
Fantastic. So look, before we wrap up today, could you maybe summarize the key catalysts and milestones that investors should watch out for across the next, say, 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, of course, very important is to finalize the phase 2 design. As Henri mentioned, we are fairly advanced there. We expect to be able to disclose more details in the coming months. And there, of course, one key component is also the discussions with pharma that we are currently having. As many times explained, we have been really active in pharma discussions. We are continuing those in a very good way, and let's see where we might end up with those during the coming months. Also, whether there is a contribution for phase 2 as well. And we continue also discussions with patient organizations, Parkinson's UK, Michael J. Fox, potentially some others with their support for phase 2 program, the potential of even additional non-dilutive financing or contribution to potential equity financing. That remains to be seen. But really, this spring and continuing towards the end of the year, we will, in a way, build the operational package together for phase 2, and then of course after that, running the phase 2 efficacy trial is of course very key for the company, and phase 2 data will be an important inflection point for Herantis, but also for Parkinson's patients. So I think there will be many exciting news coming from Herantis in the coming months.
Okay, fantastic. Really looking forward to seeing the program advance. That brings us to a close for today, but if our audience would like to learn more, please refer to the Edison website where we have our research on Herantis freely accessible. Antti, Henri, many thanks again for the insightful discussion.
Thank you.